The bridge of the stellar dominion hummed with the controlled chaos of a warship in motion, its crystalline displays casting an ethereal blue glow across the faces of the Zephyrian crew. Queen Lireleth stood at the central command platform, her elongated ears twitching slightly as she processed the incoming data streams from her reconnaissance vessels. The small blue planets spinning lazily below them had proven far more interesting than anticipated. "Your Majesty," Admiral Korath approached with his usual measured stride, his own ears betraying none of the excitement she could hear in his voice. "The tactical assessment is complete. These humans possess rudimentary plasma weaponry, but their defensive capabilities are quaint." Lireleth's lips curved into what might have been mistaken for a smile on a human face. "Quaint. Admiral, I've learned not to underestimate species that manage to split atoms before achieving faster-than-light travel. They have a certain, creative recklessness." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Their queen's fascination with primitive worlds was well known, though usually it didn't extend beyond a cursory study before annexation. This time felt different. "Ma'am, we're receiving communications from their military installations," Lieutenant Vex announced from the communications array. "They're demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions. Rather boldly, considering we could vaporize their entire continent from orbit." "Patch it through," Lireleth commanded, her ears perking forward with curiosity. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a stern-faced human in what appeared to be some sort of military uniform. His face was flushed red, and spittle flew from his mouth as he spoke. "Demand you remove your vessels from Earth's orbital space immediately. We will not tolerate this invasion." "Invasion?" Lireleth mused aloud. "We haven't even fired a warning shot. These humans certainly have active imaginations. Shall I silence their communications, Your Majesty?" Korath asked, his hand hovering over the jamming controls. "Not yet. I find their defiance refreshing. Most civilizations grovel by now." She turned back to the screen where the human was still making demands. "Tell me, Admiral, what would you estimate their chances of actually harming us?" "Approximately 0.001%, assuming they somehow manage to coordinate their entire planetary defense network simultaneously while we sit motionless and blind." "Optimistic of you." Lireleth's ears twitched with amusement. "I think I'll take a closer look at their capabilities. Prepare my personal scout fighter." "Your Majesty, surely a standard reconnaissance probe would suffice." "Where's the fun in that?" Lireleth was already moving toward the exit. "Besides, these humans seem to enjoy dramatic gestures. Who am I to disappoint them?" 20 minutes later, Lireleth's sleek personal craft descended through Earth's atmosphere, her biosynthetic armor interfacing seamlessly with the ship's systems. The armor was a marvel of Zephyrian engineering, a living second skin that responded to her thoughts and emotions, its quantum fiber weave capable of deflecting anything from particle beams to kinetic projectiles. She'd worn it through the conquest of 17 worlds, and it had never failed her. The human military base appeared on her sensors, a surprisingly sophisticated installation hidden beneath what appeared to be a mountain range. Their camouflage techniques were crude but effective, she had to admit. As she approached for a closer scan, her proximity alarms began chirping. "Incoming missile lock," her ship's AI announced in its perfectly modulated voice. "Projectile composition, conventional explosive with interesting electromagnetic properties." "Define interesting," Lireleth said, though she was already banking hard to avoid the first volley. The humans appear to have weaponized their electromagnetic pulse technology in a rather ingenious fashion. Crude, but creative. The first EMP missile detonated close enough to send ripples across her ship's shields. Nothing dangerous, but the electromagnetic cascade was unlike anything in their tactical databases. A second missile followed, then a third, each one adjusting its approach based on her evasive maneuvers. "They're learning," she murmured, genuinely impressed. "Their targeting algorithms are adapting faster than predicted." That was when the fourth missile struck. The explosion itself was insignificant, her shields absorbed the impact easily. But the electromagnetic pulse that followed was something entirely unexpected. Instead of the broad-spectrum energy disruption they'd catalogued, this pulse was precisely tuned, its frequency modulated in patterns that seemed almost deliberately designed to interfere with quantum fiber technology. Lyriletha's armor began to convulse. The quantum fibers that gave her armor its adaptive properties started unraveling at the molecular level, their carefully maintained quantum states collapsing into chaos. Pain shot through her body as the biosynthetic connections to her nervous system went haywire, sending conflicting signals that made her vision blur and her ears ring. "Mayday, Mayday," she managed to gasp into her communicator as she fought to maintain control of her ship. "This is Queen Lyrileth. I'm experiencing catastrophic system failure. The armor is." The transmission cut off as another wave of disruption cascaded through her suit. Her ship's autopilot engaged, pulling her away from the human weapons and toward the safety of the stellar dominion, but the damage was already spreading. The quantum fibers weren't just failing, they were actively deteriorating, creating a cascading failure that threatened to consume the entire suit. By the time her ship docked with the flagship, Lyrileth could barely stand. The armor that had protected her through countless battles was now slowly killing her, its failing system sending random electrical impulses through her body while its structural integrity collapsed piece by piece. "Get the Royal Engineers," Admiral Korath barked as medical technicians rushed to extract her from the fighter. "Full emergency protocols." "It won't work," Lyrileth whispered, her voice strained with pain. Her ears had drooped completely, a sign of severe distress that made the entire bridge crew exchange worried glances. "The quantum fiber matrix is genetically bonded to my biological signature. Only I can wear this armor, and only this armor can interface with our crown's command protocols." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If the Queen couldn't command the fleet from her throne, if she couldn't access the royal battle networks that connected her to every ship and weapon system, their entire command structure would collapse. Worse, the armor's failing biosynthetic components were slowly poisoning her system with each passing minute. "There has to be something," Korath insisted. "Our engineering corps is the finest in the galaxy." "The finest Zephyrian engineering corps," Lyrileth corrected, managing a weak smile despite her pain. "But this EMP weapon, it's not Zephyrian technology they've countered. They've somehow found a way to disrupt quantum fiber technology using principles our engineers never considered because we're too advanced to think like primitives." She paused, her breathing becoming more labored as another wave of system failures rippled through the armor. "Sometimes," she continued, "the solution to an advanced problem requires primitive thinking. Admiral, bring me the human prisoners. Particularly that engineer who keeps making jokes during interrogation. If anyone can think primitive enough to fix advanced technology, it might be someone who doesn't understand why it should be impossible." Admiral Koratha's ears flattened against his skull. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, trusting our most advanced technology to a human seems insane. Desperate. Unprecedented." Lyriletha's laugh turned into a cough. "Admiral, I'm dying inside the most advanced suit of armor in the galaxy because a species that still uses chemical rockets managed to think outside our tactical parameters. At this point, insane might be exactly what we need." As the medical team carefully transported her to the royal chambers, Lyrileth couldn't help but find the irony amusing. She'd come to study human ingenuity, and now her life depended on it. Jake Morrison had been counting ceiling tiles for 3 weeks, 2 days, and approximately 14 hours when the door to his detention cell finally opened with that distinctive Zephyrian hiss that sounded like an angry tea kettle. He'd gotten to know that sound intimately, along with the rhythmic hum of the ship's artificial gravity generators and the occasional tremor that suggested someone was either firing very large weapons or had serious engine problems. Well, Jake said, not bothering to look up from his contemplation of tile number 407, which had a fascinating scratch that looked remarkably like his ex-wife's disapproving frown. "Let me guess, another exciting session of, tell us about human military technology, followed by me explaining that I fix broken coffee makers for a living, not death rays." 2 guards in their intimidating crystalline armor stepped into the cell, their movements synchronized in that unnaturally precise way that suggested either military training or really good dance instructors. Behind them stood someone Jake hadn't seen before, a Zephyrian with more decorative bits on his uniform and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Human Morrison, the decorated alien said, consulting what appeared to be a holographic clipboard. You will accompany us to the royal chambers. Jake finally sat up on his narrow bunk, raising an eyebrow. Royal chambers? Did I win some kind of alien lottery? Because I should mention I never agreed to the terms and conditions. You will come now, the officer insisted, though Jake noticed his elongated ears were twitching in what he'd learned to recognize as either irritation or suppressed amusement. After 3 weeks of observation, he became something of an expert in alien ear body language. Right. The royal chambers. Jake stood and stretched, his joints popping after hours of lying on what the Zephyrians apparently considered a comfortable sleeping surface but which felt like a rock wrapped in slightly softer rock. Should I dress for the occasion? I mean, this jumpsuit is my finest formal wear, but I want to make a good impression. The lead guard's weapon made a subtle charging sound, which Jake had learned was the universal Zephyrian translation for, "Stop talking before I demonstrate why that's a bad idea." He held up his hands in mock surrender. Okay. No more fashion commentary. Lead the way, gentlemen. The walk through the ship's corridors gave Jake another opportunity to marvel at Zephyrian architecture, which seemed to be based on the principle that everything should look both impossibly advanced and vaguely uncomfortable. The walls curved in mathematically perfect arcs that made his eyes water if he stared too long, while the lighting shifted subtly from blue to violet to something that wasn't quite a color at all. You know, Jake said to his escorts, your interior designer really committed to the intimidating alien vessel aesthetic. Very cohesive. Though personally, I would have gone with more earth tones. Maybe some nice beige accent walls. The officer's ears flattened against his skull, which Jake had learned was definitely the alien equivalent of an eye roll. They passed other crew members in the corridors, all of whom stopped to stare at the human prisoner being escorted through their ship. Jake gave them friendly waves, which seemed to confuse them greatly. One young Zephyrian actually waved back before catching himself and pretending to adjust his uniform. Popular guy, Jake observed. I should start charging for autographs. The royal chambers, when they finally arrived, were exactly as overwhelming as Jake had expected. The door alone was the size of a small aircraft hangar, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move when he wasn't looking directly at them. Beyond it lay a room that defied several laws of physics Jake was pretty sure still applied, even in alien space. And there, in the center of it all, was the Queen. Jake had seen Zephyrians before during his interrogations, but Queen Lireleth was something else entirely. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with the characteristic elongated ears that marked her species, but there was an unmistakable presence about her that had nothing to do with height. Her silver hair cascaded down her back like liquid metal, and her eyes held depths that suggested she'd seen the rise and fall of civilizations. What really caught Jake's attention, though, was the fact that she looked like she was slowly being electrocuted. The armor covering her torso writhed with unstable energy patterns, its surface crackling with random electrical discharges that made her wince with each pulse. The quantum fiber weave that should have been seamlessly integrated with her biology was instead fighting against it, creating a chaotic light show that was probably extremely painful and definitely not supposed to happen. Well, Jake said, his engineer's instincts immediately kicking in, that doesn't look right. Queen Lireleth's ears perked up slightly, though whether from surprise at his casual tone or pain from another armor malfunction was hard to tell. You are the human engineer, she said, her voice carrying an accent that made every word sound like it was being delivered from a mountaintop. The one who makes jokes during interrogation. Guilty as charged, Your Majesty. Though in my defense, your interrogation techniques could really use some work. Very repetitive. I was just trying to spice things up. Jake gestured toward her malfunctioning armor. But right now, I'm more interested in whatever's going wrong with your fancy suit there. That's some seriously unstable quantum fiber behavior. The Queen's eyes narrowed. You recognize quantum fiber technology? Recognize it? Lady, I've been staring at your ship's systems for 3 weeks. Your people might think humans are primitive, but we're not blind. That armor of yours is basically a quantum fiber matrix interfaced with biosynthetic neural networks, right? Probably genetically coded to your specific biological signature to prevent unauthorized use. Jake stepped closer, his professional curiosity overriding any sense of self-preservation. But something's causing a cascade failure in the quantum states. The fibers are losing coherence and reverting to classical physics, which is why you're getting all those random electrical discharges. It's like your armor is having an identity crisis at the subatomic level. And you believe you can repair it? Queen Lireleth asked, though her tone suggested she was asking more out of desperate hope than actual confidence. Maybe. Probably. Well, okay, I have no idea, but I'm pretty good at fixing things that shouldn't be broken. Jake grinned. Plus, I work cheap. Room, board, and maybe not getting executed when this is all over. For the first time since entering the chamber, Queen Lireleth's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. Her ears tilted forward slightly, and Jake caught what might have been the ghost of a smile. Your confidence is either admirable or suicidal, Human Morrison. Jake. And honestly, those two things aren't mutually exclusive in my experience. He rubbed his hands together. So, what do you say we take a look at this armor problem? Fair warning though, my repair methods tend to involve a lot of creative swearing and at least one component that shouldn't technically work but does anyway. And if you fail? Jake shrugged. Then you'll have the unique distinction of being the first galactic conqueror killed by her own armor having a technical malfunction. That's got to be worth something in the history books. Queen Lireleth stared at him for a long moment, her ears twitching in what Jake was learning to recognize as either deep thought or preparation for violence. Finally, she gestured toward a workshop area filled with tools that looked like they'd been designed by very artistic engineers. Very well, Jake Morrison. Show me this creative swearing you speak of. Oh, Your Majesty, Jake said, rolling up his sleeves, you are in for a treat. Jake had been elbow-deep in alien technology for 6 hours, and he was starting to understand why the Zephyrian engineers had given up. The quantum fiber weave wasn't just damaged, it was actively rebelling against every attempt to stabilize it, like a teenager determined to make poor life choices. Okay, so here's what I think happened, Jake said, carefully extracting another burnt-out fiber strand with what appeared to be crystalline tweezers. Your people built this armor to be absolutely perfect, right? Every quantum state precisely calibrated, every biosynthetic connection optimized for maximum efficiency. Queen Lireleth sat perfectly still on the diagnostic platform, though Jake could see her ears twitch every time he touched a particularly sensitive component. That is correct. Zephyrian engineering tolerates no imperfection. Right, and that's your problem. Jake held up the damaged fiber, which was still sparking occasionally. See, humans learned a long time ago that if you make something too perfect, it becomes fragile. We build redundancy into everything because we know stuff breaks. But your armor was so perfectly tuned that when it encountered something outside its parameters, like that EMP weapon, it had no idea how to adapt. Are you suggesting that human engineering is superior to Zephyrian technology? The Queen's tone was carefully neutral, but Jake caught the slight flattening of her ears. Oh, hell no. Your tech is centuries ahead of ours. I'm just saying that sometimes being a little bit wrong in the right way is better than being perfectly wrong. Jake grinned and gestured toward his improvised repair station, which now included components salvaged from his own ship, several Zephyrian tools he'd repurposed in ways that probably violated their warranties, and what appeared to be a coffee maker he'd somehow convinced the replicators to produce. Are you using a beverage preparation device as part of my armor's repair system? Queen Lireleth asked, her ears standing straight up in what Jake had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of raised eyebrows. Technically, it's a precision heating element with very fine temperature control. The fact that it can also make coffee is just a bonus. Jake patted the machine affectionately. Sometimes the best tool for the job is the one nobody expects. Plus, I work better when I'm caffeinated. Your species is truly bizarre, the Queen observed, though Jake detected a note of fondness in her voice. You should see us on weekends. Jake carefully began weaving a new section of quantum fiber, using techniques that were part Zephyrian engineering manual and part pure intuition. So tell me, Your Majesty, what's it like running a galactic empire? Good benefits package? The benefits are adequate. The paperwork is eternal. Queen Lyriletha's ears drooped slightly. Do you know how many reports I must review daily? Trade disputes, territorial boundary adjustments, requests for orbital bombardment permits. Wait, you need permits for orbital bombardment? Form ZX-447-B, filed in triplicate with the Department of Planetary Subjugation. Very tedious. Jake paused in his work to stare at her. You're joking. I am learning to appreciate human humor. Though I assure you, the bureaucracy is quite real. The Queen's lips curved in what was definitely a smile this time. Last month, Admiral Korath had to delay a conquest by 3 days because someone in accounting misplaced the planetary invasion authorization codes. That's actually hilarious. Here I was thinking galactic conquest was all dramatic speeches and space battles, but it's really just really aggressive bureaucracy. The dramatic speeches are mostly for the subjugated populations. They expect them. Queen Lyrileth shifted slightly as Jake worked on a particularly delicate section near her shoulder. The space battles are more fun, but they require so much paperwork afterward. Casualty reports, ammunition expenditure forms, damage assessments. You know, back on Earth, we have people called accountants who handle that stuff so the important people don't have to. We have those too. They are enthusiastic about their work. Sometimes I suspect they conquer worlds just to have more forms to fill out. Jake laughed, nearly dropping the quantum fiber he was threading. Okay, that explains a lot about your empire's expansion rate. It's not military conquest, it's accounting optimization. You jest, but you are not entirely wrong. The Queen's ears were relaxed now, tilted forward in what Jake had learned indicated genuine amusement. Tell me about your world, Jake Morrison. What did you do before you became a prisoner of war? I fixed things. Spacecraft, mostly, but really anything that broke down and needed creative problem solving. Jake paused to take a sip of coffee from his improvised brewing system. There's something satisfying about taking something that's completely broken and making it work again. Plus, broken things don't usually shoot at you, which is a nice change of pace. You enjoy the challenge of repair? Love it. There's this moment when you finally figure out what's wrong, when all the pieces click together and you realize exactly what needs to be done. It's like solving a puzzle where the solution makes the universe a little bit less broken. Queen Lyrileth was quiet for a moment, her ears tilting in a way Jake hadn't seen before. That is, a beautiful way to think about it. Thanks. My ex-wife used to say I cared more about broken machines than broken relationships, which, you know, fair point. Machines are usually more straightforward about what's wrong with them. She left you? Yep. For a tax attorney, if you can believe that. Apparently, stability and predictable income were more attractive than comes home covered in grease talking about quantum manifolds. Jake shrugged. Her loss, really. I make excellent coffee. I am beginning to understand why. The Queen gestured toward his improvised setup. This beverage you have created is quite remarkable. Right? Perfect temperature, optimal extraction time, and it doubles as a quantum fiber calibration tool. Multifunctional beverages are the hallmark of superior engineering. Jake returned to his work, carefully aligning the new fiber matrices with the Queen's existing biosynthetic connections. It was delicate work that required absolute precision, but somehow felt natural, like he'd been doing it his whole life instead of making it up as he went along. Jake, Queen Lireleth said softly, "May I ask you something?" "Shoot. Are you not afraid? You are alone on an alien vessel, repairing technology you barely understand, for a species that conquered your world." Jake considered this while threading another connection. "You know, I probably should be terrified. But honestly, this is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in years. Plus, you haven't actually conquered Earth yet, and I'm starting to think you might not want to." "What makes you say that?" "Well, for one thing, you could have just taken whatever information you wanted from me, but instead you're sitting here making conversation while I fix your armor. And for another." Jake paused, meeting her eyes directly. "You laughed at my joke about the accounting department. People who are planning to destroy a world don't usually develop a sense of humor about bureaucracy." Queen Lireleth's ears flicked in surprise. "You are more perceptive than I expected. I'm an engineer. We're trained to see how things actually work, not how they're supposed to work." Jake made a final adjustment to the fiber matrix and stepped back. "Okay, moment of truth. This should either fix your armor or turn you into a very elegant lamp. Ready?" "I find your confidence both reassuring and terrifying. That's the Morrison guarantee, results that exceed expectations in ways you never imagined." Jake activated the repair sequence, and the armor began to glow with a soft, steady light that was completely different from the chaotic sparking of before. Queen Lireleth's eyes widened as the biosynthetic connections re-established themselves, the quantum fibers settling into their new configuration with a harmonious hum that filled the workshop. "It works," she breathed, her ears standing tall with amazement. "Of course it works. I told you I was good at this." Jake grinned and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To the power of creative engineering and really good coffee." Queen Lireleth stood, testing the armor's mobility with fluid movements that spoke of years of combat training. "This is remarkable. The integration feels even smoother than before." "That's because I built in some adaptive flexibility. Your armor will actually learn from future encounters and adjust its defenses accordingly. Think of it as armor with a growth mindset. You have given my armor personality. More like the ability to think for itself a little bit. Don't worry, it won't develop opinions about your fashion choices or anything." Queen Lireleth laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed her entire face. "Jake Morrison, you are either the most brilliant engineer in the galaxy or completely insane. Why not both?" The alarms started screaming just as Jake was explaining the finer points of adaptive quantum mechanics to Queen Lireleth, who had been listening with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for military briefings or really good coffee. "Well," Jake said, setting down his cup with deliberate calm, "that doesn't sound like a routine maintenance alert." Admiral Koroth burst into the workshop, his crystalline armor reflecting the emergency lighting in chaotic patterns. "Your Majesty, we have a situation. Void Reaper vessels have emerged from hyperspace. They've found us." Queen Lireleth was already moving, her newly repaired armor responding instantly to her commands. "How many ships?" 7 dreadnoughts, multiple support vessels. They're demanding we surrender you personally or they'll reduce this entire fleet to cosmic dust." Karotha's ears were flat against his skull. "They claim you murdered their war prince 3 cycles ago." "I did murder their war prince 3 cycles ago. He was trying to enslave the Andorian colonies." The Queen paused at the workshop's exit. "Jake, you should return to the detention levels for your safety." "Or," Jake said, already following her toward the door, "I could stick around and help you deal with whatever a Void Reaper is. I'm assuming they're not friendly neighbors dropping by to borrow a cup of sugar." "They are an ancient warrior species that views death in battle as the highest honor," Queen Lireleth explained as they hurried toward the bridge. "They have been pursuing my fleet for months, seeking revenge for their fallen prince. So basically space Vikings with a grudge." "Got it." Jake grinned as they entered a transport pod that shot through the ship's corridors at speeds that definitely violated several safety regulations. "This day just keeps getting more interesting." The bridge was controlled chaos when they arrived, with crew members manning stations while tactical displays showed the approaching Void Reaper fleet. The enemy ships looked like someone had decided to build warships using only sharp angles and bad intentions. Status report, Queen Lireleth commanded, sliding seamlessly into her command throne. The biosynthetic connections Jake had repaired interfaced perfectly with the ship's systems, her consciousness expanding to encompass the entire fleet. "They're jamming our hyperspace drives," Lieutenant Vex reported. "Standard Void Reaper tactics. They want to ensure we can't escape before they finish us. Their shields are adapting to our weapons," another officer added. "Each volley does less damage than the last." Jake studied the tactical display with growing excitement. "Hey, Your Majesty, remember how we talked about the advantages of imperfect engineering? This is hardly the time for philosophical discussions," Admiral Korath snapped. "No, wait, he might have something," Queen Lireleth said, her ears perking up with interest. "What are you thinking, Jake?" "Well, these Void Reapers are adapting to your weapons because they're learning your patterns, right? Perfect Zephyrian engineering means perfect, predictable targeting solutions." Jake gestured toward the display. "But what if we made our weapons a little bit imperfect? Random variations that couldn't be predicted or adapted to? That would reduce our accuracy significantly," Korath protested. "Maybe. Or maybe it would make us impossible to defend against because there's no pattern to learn." Jake was already moving toward an auxiliary station. "Can I access your targeting systems?" Queen Lireleth's smile was sharp enough to cut quantum steel. "Do it." Jake's fingers flew over controls that still felt alien but somehow made sense, like a language he'd always known but never spoken. He began introducing random variables into the targeting algorithms, chaos factors that would make each shot slightly different from the last. "This is insane," Admiral Korath muttered. "Yeah, but it's the good kind of insane," Jake replied. "Sometimes the best solution is the one that shouldn't work." The first volley fired under Jake's modified parameters scattered across space in patterns that defied military logic. Half the shots missed their intended targets entirely, but the ones that connected punched through Void Reaper shields like they weren't even there. "Impossible," the enemy commander's voice crackled over the communication system. "Your weapons cannot penetrate our adaptive defenses. Want to bet?" Jake called back, earning startled looks from the entire bridge crew. "Sorry, Your Majesty, was I not supposed to engage in trash talk with the enemy?" "By all means, continue," Queen Lireleth said, her eyes bright with combat excitement. "I find your approach refreshing." The battle that followed was unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. Jake's improvised targeting solutions turned their precisely engineered weapons into tools of beautiful chaos, each shot unique and unpredictable. The Void Reapers, masters of adaptation and tactical analysis, found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to have no tactics at all. "This is working," Lieutenant Vex reported with obvious amazement. "Enemy shield efficiency is dropping rapidly." "Of course it's working," Jake said, fine-tuning another weapons array. "You can't adapt to pure randomness. It's like trying to predict where a dropped piece of toast will land, the universe just laughs at you." Queen Lireleth coordinated the fleet's movements with fluid grace, her repaired armor allowing her to interface with every ship simultaneously. But Jake noticed she was also laughing, actually laughing, as enemy shots went wide because they'd been aimed at where Zephyrian ships should have been, not where Jake's chaotic navigation algorithms had put them. "Admiral," she called to Korath, "remind me to review our military academy curriculum. I think we may have been teaching tactics all wrong." The tide of battle shifted decisively when Jake managed to hack into the enemy's communication network using a combination of human-computer viruses and Zephyrian quantum encryption. The result was that the Void Reaper fleet began receiving contradictory orders in 17 different languages, including what appeared to be a recipe for something called banana bread. "What is banana bread?" Queen Lireleth asked during a brief lull in the fighting. "It's a sweet baked good made from overripe fruit. Completely irrelevant to space combat," which is why it's so confusing to receive instructions for making it in the middle of a battle. Your mind works in fascinating ways, Jake Morrison. The Void Reaper commander's final transmission was a mixture of rage and bewilderment. This is not how war is conducted. There are rules. Protocols. You cannot simply improvise victory. Watch us, Jake replied cheerfully. When the last enemy ship retreated into hyperspace, the bridge fell into stunned silence. They had not only survived an encounter with the feared Void Reapers, they had decisively defeated them using tactics that violated every principle of military science. Well, Admiral Korath said finally, that was educational. That was beautiful, Queen Lireleth corrected, rising from her command throne. Jake, your approach to combat is as unorthodox as your approach to engineering. I prefer to think of it as creatively practical. Jake stretched, realizing he was exhausted but exhilarated. So, what happens now? Do I go back to my cell, or? Queen Lireleth was quiet for a long moment, her ears tilted in deep thought. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of decisions that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Korath, prepare a message for the High Council. Inform them that Earth is to be granted full alliance status, effective immediately. The bridge crew stared at her in shock. Alliance status was reserved for species that had proven themselves as equals, not conquered territories. Your Majesty, Korath began carefully, perhaps we should discuss. There is nothing to discuss. Today, a human engineer saved not only my life but our entire fleet, using methods our most advanced minds never considered. Queen Lireleth's voice carried absolute authority. A species capable of such innovation deserves respect, not conquest. Jake felt something shift inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since his divorce. Does this mean I get to go home? It means you get to choose, Queen Lireleth said, her ears tilting forward with an expression he'd come to recognize as hope. You could return to Earth as an ambassador, helping to establish formal relations between our peoples. Or you could stay here, as my chief engineering advisor. The position comes with excellent benefits, though the paperwork is still eternal. Jake considered this, looking around the bridge at beings who had gone from captors to colleagues in the span of a few hours. Will there be more situations requiring creative swearing and improvised coffee-making equipment? I suspect there will be many such situations. And I'd get to keep working on impossible problems with technology that shouldn't exist. Daily. Jake grinned. Your Majesty, you've got yourself a deal. But I have one condition. Queen Lireleth raised an eyebrow, or what passed for one on a Zephyrian. Name it. I want to upgrade your entire fleet's coffee systems. If I'm going to be fixing the impossible on a regular basis, I'm going to need really good coffee. Done. Queen Lireleth extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement she'd learned from their time together. Welcome to the Zephyrian Empire, Chief Engineer Morrison. As Jake shook her hand, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just a few days. He'd gone from a divorced spacecraft mechanic to the engineering advisor for a galactic empire, all because he'd been willing to think differently about problems everyone else considered unsolvable. You know, he said, my ex-wife is going to be so confused when she gets my change of address notification. Queen Lireleth's laugh echoed through the bridge, her ears bright with genuine joy. I suspect she will regret her choice of tax attorneys. Oh, definitely. He may have been stable and predictable, but I bet he never saved a galactic fleet using coffee-making equipment and creative chaos theory. As the Stellar Dominion set course for Earth to begin the complex process of establishing formal diplomatic relations, Jake found himself looking forward to the future in ways he hadn't for years. He'd discovered that sometimes the best solutions came from the most unexpected places, and that being a little bit broken in the right way could be more valuable than being perfectly whole. Besides, he had a galaxy full of impossible problems to solve, and for the first time in his life, that felt like exactly where he belonged.